Good morning, everyone, and or good afternoon or good evening if you're watching the recording on YouTube or Facebook later. This is our first edition of My Empowered Political Life. This is going to be a daily thing we're doing, 7:30 Pacific, 10:30 Eastern, as many days as we can in a row to try and keep up with things. It's a crazy world right now, and we want to help you keep up with the news. I know a lot of you don't have the time to keep up with the political and legal news, so we're going to bring you some of the most important legal and political news of the day every day in just a quick 15-minute format. And that way you can follow along with what's happening and not have to look it all up yourself. I'm going to do the work for you. And that way you can stay empowered, stay active, figure out what is your opinion on everything. We're not going to tell you what to think. We're just going to tell you what's happening and then give you an idea of some of the consequences and how to think it through. And then you can decide how to act from there. And we're going to give you some more resources at the end as well. And of course, if you're on Facebook, we appreciate you watching live, and we will drop a link below to join our YouTube channel so that you can like and subscribe there. And if you're on YouTube, thank you very much. Please like and subscribe. The more people who like and subscribe, obviously, the bigger reach we can have, and the bigger community we can form, and the bigger difference we can make. So we are glad you are here. And we're going to start today, as it turns out, the biggest political and legal news of the day is the president defying a court order. And this is sort of a big deal, as you might imagine. The courts are sort of the last check on executive power and legislative power in the United States. It's part of our separation of powers, our three branches of government. So when the president defies a court order, it's going to be big legal news and big political news. So some of the background. Until now, the current administration, they have failed to comply with some court orders. There have been temporary restraining orders and a few permanent injunctions against the administration, and they have complied with some and not complied with others. But so far, their failure to comply has been like saying the dog ate my homework. They've been trying to come up with what they think are reasonable excuses for not complying, as opposed to open defiance. So they've been saying things like, we can't find all the paperwork, right? We need more time to find the paperwork or to fill out the paperwork or to bring people back or whatever it might be. Or they've said, we can't find the right people. We're looking to rehire the people. We can't find them. Or the people who have knowledge of the situation, we're trying to find them to figure it out. So these are kind of delaying tactics, right? We need a little more time. As I said, this is the dog ate my homework excuse, as we call it colloquially in the legal profession, for failing to comply with a court order. But it's not been open defiance. They've just been delaying, looking for excuses. Now, however, the administration is in clear and explicit violation of a court order, and they are challenging the court to do something about it. They're basically saying, hey, court, we're not going to do what you said. What are you going to do about it? This, of course, is a big change. This is not a dog ate my homework. This is like going to your professor and saying, I don't want to take the exam. I'm not going to take the exam. And I dare you to give me a failing grade to see what happens. So, what's happening right now? The president, as you may have heard over the last few days, has invoked the Alien Enemies Act. So, this act was first passed by Congress in 1798, and it gives the president emergency powers to deport certain aliens when we're in a declared war or under invasion by a foreign government. So this until today, the Alien Enemies Act has only been invoked three times: in 1812, when we were in a declared war, in 1917, when we were in a declared war, and in 1941, when we were in a declared war. This is the first time any president has tried to use it outside of a declared war. And in fact, the argument is, well, we're under invasion, but the only time we've been invaded by a foreign government was in 1812. The United States, as you know, we have the protection of oceans on either side of us. We don't really get invaded all that often. The last time we were invaded was 1812. So the president used this alleged power to deport somewhere around 200 or 300 Venezuelan migrants. We don't know the exact number. I've heard the number 238 bandied about, but nobody's able to confirm that. So it's somewhere in the 200 to 300 range. We don't know the exact number. Now, let's be clear. Some of the people being deported are the folks who you normally would want deported. Some of them are here illegally, have not followed the rules, and they may be part of violent gangs, right? So I'm not saying that everyone who's being deported is completely innocent or completely guilty. Some of them probably are the sort of folks that, under normal circumstances, you would want deported. But some of them are not the folks you want deported. Some of them are not part of gangs. Some of them are innocent people who want asylum from a brutal authoritarian regime in Venezuela. You may have heard Venezuela has a brutal left-wing authoritarian regime. It's not fun to live under if you're a certain type of person. Some of these folks appear to be, at least if you believe their attorneys' stories, some of them appear to be LGBTQ members who were persecuted by the authoritarian regime in Venezuela and were seeking asylum here and did it legally. Others, they may or may not be LGBTQ activists, but they are here under the rules. They followed the asylum rules, trying to come here to escape an authoritarian regime. So they are undocumented, but they are following the rules. And the government has now admitted in court, this is fresh news as of yesterday afternoon, that some unspecified number of the folks who have been deported have no criminal history. I say unspecified because the government refused to say how many of these folks have a criminal history and how many don't. As I said, some of them appear to have a criminal history and are the sorts of folks who would normally be deported, and some of them have no criminal history. There's a mix of people in here, which is the whole problem. The president has made no factual determination before rounding these folks up and deporting them. Normally, there are due process concerns and there are rights in place and procedures in place to figure out which people should be deported and which people should not be deported. But there's a lot of things bandied about right now. I've listened to some of the attorneys involved who represent some of the people who have been deported. And some of the attorneys are claiming their clients are activists who are here on asylum claims. Some of them may be here undocumented slash illegally, but have no criminal history and are holding down jobs and are decent people and are being deported anyway. And some of them are gang members who are violent. But that's the whole point, is that these folks, these 200 or 300, have been rounded up as a group. There's been no individual determination on which ones should be deported and which ones should not. They were all just sent out of country. And I will say, they appear to all be Venezuelans as far as we can tell, but they were not sent to Venezuela. They were sent to El Salvador, to a brutal prison camp in El Salvador. And you may have seen some of the videos that may or may not be part of that. Again, a lot of this is unconfirmed. This is all happening as we speak. So what's happening now? Again, the ACLU and other organizations have sued on behalf of clients who were deported without due process rights. The case was assigned to James Boasberg in the District of Columbia District Court. Mr. Boasberg he's the current presiding chief judge in the DC District Court. This is a longtime, well-qualified judge. This is not this is not a crazy person. Again, this is the chief judge in the District of Columbia, which is the biggest circuit in the country, the most important one. And that Judge Boasberg determines that the Aliens Enemies Act does not apply. Why? Because we're not in a declared war. Only Congress can declare war, and we have not declared war in Venezuela. And because Venezuela has not invaded us as a nation. There are migrants from Venezuela, just as there are migrants from all over the world in the United States, some of whom are here legally, some of whom not, but there is no invasion by a foreign state. So the judge determined that there is no authority under this law. So he ordered initially, this was a few days ago in the initial hearing, the judge ordered that the folks who were rounded up be kept here in the United States in detention until we could figure things out and not be deported. So that was the order. Now, during the initial hearing, we had a 1-hour recess because the Department of Justice lawyers came up and said, "We don't know what's going on." Now, I don't know how true or not their statement is. Maybe they really didn't know what was going on because things were happening very, very quickly. We were talking about a matter of hours. So it's quite possible that the Department of Justice lawyers who went to the hearing really didn't know what was going on. So they went to the judge and said, "We need more time." And the judge said, "I'll give you an hour to figure out what's happening, and we'll take a 1 hour recess and come back." Now, during that 1 hour, ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, they put these 200 to 300 people on airplanes during that recess. That appears not to have been an accident. It appears they wanted them on the airplanes and they used that 1 hour recess in the hearing to do it. So an hour later, they reconvene and the judge learns that the folks they're talking about have been put on airplanes. So what does the judge say? He says, "Turn the airplanes around. Do it immediately." In fact, he used the word immediately. The judge issued a verbal order in court to turn the airplanes around immediately as soon as he learned this happened. And then it takes another hour for the order to be physically written up and entered into the electronic court docket. And by the time that hour passed, the airplanes are now in international airspace. And the Department of Justice lawyers argue, well, now that the planes are in international airspace, they cannot be turned around and the judge has no jurisdiction. Now, you might be guessing correctly that that's not how the law works. These planes they have, Americans on them, so not just the people being deported, but the guards, the security guards, and the ICE officials and everything. They're chartered by the United States of America. That's not how the law works. But the government refused to turn around the airplanes, and they landed in San Salvador, and people were transferred to an El Salvadorian prison. So the next day, the judge is understandably upset that the government did not do what he wanted, and he demands an explanation. The Department of Justice lawyers, they literally refuse to give an explanation to the judge. In fact, the quotes I heard, and I'm trying to find the transcript right now, but the quotes I heard were to the effect of the judge saying, "Under what authority did you refuse to comply with my order?" And Justice said, "We can't tell you under what authority." And then the judge asked, "Under what authority can you refuse to answer my questions in court?" And the Department of Justice said, "We can't tell you what authority we have for that either." So the Department of Justice, they claimed that they don't have an explanation and they don't have to give the explanation to the judge for refusing the order. So again, what's going on is the judge, and again, this is not some outlier judge in the middle of nowhere. This is the chief judge in the District of Columbia, simply interpreted the language of the law as we would normally understand it. The law applies if we're in a declared war, we're not in a declared war, or if we're under invasion by a foreign government, which is not the case. So the judge simply interpreted a law that was passed by Congress and signed by a previous president. And now the administration is saying it does not have to comply with the judge's order. And Republicans in Congress are now calling to impeach the judge for simply interpreting the law in the way it was written. This brings up the old quote. This is an apocryphal quote attributed to President Andrew Jackson. He probably did not say this, even though you will often appear it attributed to him, but he did certainly act as though he did say it. He probably said something similar. He probably didn't say this, but the quote that's often attributed is, "The Chief Justice has made his ruling. Now let him enforce it." The point being, when the courts make a ruling, what are they going to do if the president doesn't want to comply? And we do have admissions, in case you're wondering, from the administration on the enforcement and of this order and whether they can comply with it. The administration is openly admitting that they are defying a court order. Now, there are some statements from them that say we are not defying a court order, but then we have statements like this. Pam Bondi, our attorney general, has said he can't do it. What he's done is an intrusion on the president's authority. In other words, she's saying a judge cannot interpret an act of Congress to mean what it says and enforce it. Tom Homan, who is our head of immigration in the administration right now, they call him the border czar or the immigration czar, depending on who you ask. He said, "We're not stopping. I don't care what the judges think." Again, an admission, we're going to do what we want despite the court order. And then our press secretary, Carolyn Levitt, she said there's actually a question about whether a verbal order carries the same weight as a written order. This was in response to questions from the press about when the judge said, "Turn around the planes, why didn't you do it?" She's basically saying a verbal order from the judge, from the bench, is not binding, which again is not how the law works. A verbal order from the bench is binding, and they chose not to comply with it. And then she said, a single judge in a single city cannot direct the movements of an aircraft carrier full of foreign alien terrorists who were physically expelled from the U.S. soil. It's a very strange quote. First, a single judge in a single city. We're not talking about any judge anywhere. We're talking about the chief judge in the District of Columbia, where the government is located. I don't know why she mentioned an aircraft carrier. That seems to be some sort of nonsense. Nobody was put on any aircraft carriers. We are not using our aircraft carriers to deport anybody. And then foreign alien terrorists, there is no allegation that any of these people are terrorists, and there's certainly no factual finding that any of these people are terrorists. Some of them, as I said, probably are violent gang members, but we don't know which ones or how many, and there was no factual finding, and a lot of innocent people seem to have been caught up in the mess. Now, as far as the impeachment talks are concerned, Chief Justice John Roberts of SCOTUS spoke up. Fortunately, he said, for more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. So, fortunately, he has spoken up on the impeachment question. I'm hoping that the Chief Justice's words carry some weight. So that's what's happening right now, just from a factual standpoint and a background standpoint. And now we're going to get into our segment, which we're going to finish off every daily call with this segment. We're going to call it Doors and Corners. Doors and corners, doors and corners. Look behind the doors, look around the corners. In other words, what are the consequences? What are the implications that we should be aware of? Not just looking at the facts, but what's coming next that we might want to be concerned about and act on. So the first thing we want to look at is basically the whole question of you and what army. The old quote attributed to Andrew Jackson is basically telling the courts, you and what army? You have an order. How are you going to enforce it? You don't have an army. The president does. How are the courts going to enforce it? And then there's the question of due process, right? So for all of the folks who were deported, there was no due process afforded. There was no hearing. There was no factual finding. There was no court deportation order. They were literally just handcuffed and put on airplanes and sent to El Salvador. And keep in mind, these people are not even from El Salvador. They were sent to a third-party country that they may or may not have ever visited, except for possibly traveling through. And like I said, some of them are probably violent gang members who are here illegally and normally would be deported. But the thing is, if some people don't have due process rights, then nobody has due process rights. Either due process works for everyone or it works for no one. There's not a whole lot of in between there. So you can agree with the deportation, and that's fine. I'm not telling you how to feel about it. But there is an issue of if there's no due process for the people you don't like, then there's no due process for the people you do like, or even for yourself. And who's going to hold the president responsible for violating court order? I don't know the answer to that question. This is just looking around doors and corners to figure out what's coming next. I don't know who's going to hold the president responsible. Again, the president has control of the military and the federal marshals. So it's not like the president can be even held in contempt. And then what happens if the president keeps ignoring court orders? This is a serious question. What if an administration is emboldened by ignoring one order to ignore another and another? And this just doesn't apply to this administration, but it could apply to the next one and the one after that, and the one after that. We could have a serious problem if presidential administrations going forward just decide that they don't have to comply with court orders anymore. So that's our looking around doors and corners for today. We'll do this again tomorrow. Now, please remember, excuse me, if you're watching on Facebook, if you're not on our YouTube channel, you will find a link below to join our YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe. As you know, the more folks who like and subscribe, the bigger reach we can have with this program. So if you think this is valuable, if you want to see more of it every day, and if you want more people to see it every day, please like and subscribe so that we can reach a bigger audience. And comment below, whether you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube. Please comment below to let me know what stories do you want me to cover in the upcoming days and weeks on our new daily show here. And if you want to hear more about today's story, type rule of law in the comments, because that's what we're talking about today is the rule of law. Type rule of law in the comments if you want me to cover today's story more in depth, because it's ongoing and there's lots more details. So thanks so much, everyone. I appreciate you being here on our first daily show, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.